So let's imagine a nation trying to fight a war or to make treaties or to conduct trade, but every single state speaks with its own single voice. So that's not unity. That turns out just to be noise. And in Federalist number 22, Alexander Hamilton argues that a republic divided by local jealousies cannot survive in a world where nations act together. The Constitution, according to Hamilton, gives America a single voice, and it's clear, and it's strong, and it's finally capable of being heard. I'm Matt Hasquin. I'm a high school history teacher, and I'm taking you through the Federalist Papers. We're making this journey together, and we're going in order all the way up to number 85. And in this one, well, it's number 22. So this essay continues Hamilton's critique of the Articles of Confederation. As I tell my students, they're like the suck salad sprinkled with the bacon bits of despair. They're just awful. But by this point, the failures of the Articles are pretty well undeniable. Foreign nations don't take the United States seriously. Commerce is in chaos, and the government can't even enforce its own laws. There's no executive power. And Hamilton begins with a simple premise. He says, a government without power is no government at all. And yes, the article, he says, are power in name only. And so Hamilton lists the major structural flaws of the Articles. It's not an abstract kind of thing. It's rather precise, in his specific approach. He talks about how there's no power to regulate commerce. There's no enforcement of treaties. There's unfair representation in the Confederation Congress. Dependence on state quotas for troops and monies where the states don't meet those quotas. And then there's a lack of a national judiciary. And each one of these 5 points, according to Hamilton, is a nail in the coffin of the Confederation that exists between the 13 states. So Hamilton starts off with commerce. He's like, hey, this is the important blood supply of any modern nation. And under the Articles, every state made its own trade laws and its own tariffs. New York would tax goods from Connecticut. Virginia was preparing to fight this, an actual war with Maryland over water rights on the Potomac. Foreign nations are exploiting the divisions between the states by playing the states against each other. And Hamilton writes that America's economy resembles the politics of Europe. And that's not a compliment. He's insisting that the Constitution must give the Congress power over commerce, not to control it, but to coordinate it. And the reason why, he gets into all these other reasons here, but let's start off with like the foreign policy chaos that's existing too. Because the states could, ignore national treaties, foreign policies stop taking American diplomacy seriously. And Hamilton warns, he writes, the faith, the reputation, the peace of the whole Union are constantly at the mercy of the prejudices or passions of a part. So, in other words, what Hamilton is saying is one reckless state could embarrass all 13. So that's not sovereignty, that's actual self-sabotage. And so the Constitution fixes this by making treaties binding on everyone, right? So the treaties fall under the power of the president, who then goes on to have them approved by the Senate, and that makes, the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, provides the specific framework for taking care of treaties. But then if we look at the unequal representation argument that he makes with the Congress, Hamilton criticizes the one state, one vote rule in the Confederation Congress. So, tiny little Delaware held as much power as, vast Virginia. And Hamilton calls it a perversion of the fundamental maxim of Republican government, and that is that the majority should rule. Representation, according to Hamilton, should reflect both equality of states and equality of citizens. And that's why the Constitution creates a bicameral chamber. You have two houses, one by the people, one by the states. And that's justice through actual balance in the legislature. Now, the quotas on troops and money and all that stuff, well, under the Articles of Confederation, Congress couldn't raise its own army, and it could not raise funds. It had to ask the states for both. And most of the time, it would get excuses instead of cash or instead of the soldiers. And so Hamilton says that this system operates with a feebleness in every direction. And by the time the states debate, delay, and disagree, the danger, whether it's foreign or domestic, has either passed or triumphed. And so the Constitution gives Congress the power to, the direct power to raise troops and revenue. No more waiting, no more begging. And then the missing judiciary aspect is perhaps the most overlooked flaw, because Hamilton, according to Hamilton says it is the absence of a national court system that is so damning to the Union. Without one, the disputes between states fester and trade can grind to a halt. And so Hamilton writes that under the Articles of Confederation, there is no power to resolve controversies between members of the Union. And so the Constitution introduces federal courts to ensure uniform justice, because liberty without law is just noise. So let's talk about the morality then of unity as Hamilton states it, because he insists that federal power is not the enemy of liberty. It's actually in its protection. And so you have a divided republic that becomes easy prey for eternal corruption, but also external manipulation. But a unified republic can defend its interests, it can fulfill its promises, and it can earn respect on the world stage. And so he writes that the fabric of American empire ought to rest on the consent of the people, not the consent of the states. In that single line, Hamilton is effectively redefining sovereignty itself. So if we get to our chain of reasoning portion of the video, let's tighten down Hamilton's logic once again. So first of all, the Articles create disorder, both economically and politically. And also, unregulated commerce and weak treaties invite foreign control and interference. Equal voting by unequal states violates Republican, small r, fairness. And dependence on states destroys reliability. And then finally, the Constitution unites, it balances, and it empowers the nation. And there's Federalist 22 in 5 easy steps. Now, the tone overall here and the transition of this essay, there's passion here, but there's also a degree of fatigue, because Hamilton sounds like a man tired of arguing the obvious. He's a realist that's pleading for rationality. And he's saying you can't build a country on voluntary cooperation. You build it on structure, justice, and law. And that's exactly what the Constitution provides when compared to the Articles of Confederation. So it still echoes in our modern times here, because the logic of Federalist 22 is rather timeless. Nations today still face the same questions. Do we speak with one voice or many? Do we value principle or preference? And so Hamilton's answer hasn't aged a day. Unity isn't uniformity. It's coordination for the common good. And so when we take the takeaways we can look at here from number 22 is that disunity makes a nation weak and divided. And shared power makes law legitimate and long-lasting. And then finally, the Constitution gives America the one thing it lacked, and that is a voice that carries onto the world stage. Federalist number 22 is Hamilton's final dismantling of the Articles of Confederation. He's done arguing for change. He's trying to prove that no alternative exists. He believes the Constitution is not an experiment. It is actual evolution. It's the next step in making liberty sustainable. So I'm Matt Hasquin, and this is another one of those things we should know just by being alive. If this helped you see why America needed a single unified voice at this time, please, do the shares and the follows and stuff like that. And hey, hang around, because I'll be coming up on Federalist number 23 soon, where Hamilton begins explaining the specific new powers of this new federal government. He also talks about defense, security, and survival. Thanks for taking the time to hang out this long, and I'll see you in the next one.